Here on the Creative Thinker Podcast, we discuss all theories, philosophy, and thought behind the creative process. And we hope that you find some inspiration along the way. Hello, 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 creative thinkers all across the globe. Welcome to the Creative Thinker Podcast. My name is Henry Moon, and I am joined by the most fantastic co-host on planet Earth, Michael Vasquez. How we doing, Michael?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. We were a little funny here right before this recording. Got a little wild. But yeah, no, I'm doing good. I'm excited for this month's emphasis. I don't want to use the title of this month, describing this month.
Emphasis, which is... Wait, can I math this out? There we go. Focus.
For anybody watching the podcast.
Yeah, anybody watching on YouTube too. Today's topic is I don't have time and other lies we tell ourselves.
A limited resource mindset. That's kind of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so we're going to be taking a deep dive into why you should get out of your own head, more or less. Don't lie to yourself. Get out there and create.
And that's the podcast.
And that's it. We're done.
Don't lie to yourself.
Thanks for tuning in. Hope you have a great week.
To all of our listeners, we're in a mood.
Yeah.
We're in a mood. So I hope you enjoy this journey that we're about to go on.
Like, wow, they're having a great time. I wish I was. Here we go. So we're going to introduce this new thing this week that I'm so proud of. No, I'm overselling it. But we're going to introduce this new thing where we talk about what we're inspired by for this week. And to kick us off, the most fantastic co-host on the planet. You ready with something, Michael?
Yeah, I already have a pull.
Oh, hell yeah. Look at that. This man's prepared.
Yes, I am. So for me today, this week, my inspiration.
This week. Let's get it. We're not drunk. I'm serious. 100%. No drinks. Good day, though.
Yes. So one of the things that inspired me this week, that was a better sentence right there.
Boom.
I was scrolling through YouTube trying to find like good music to listen to while I did some writing and prep for our podcast today. And a title and the music that hit me that I was listening to sparked my imagination. What I saw was a YouTube title, and I'm a big Halo nerd, so it's 10 times that Spartans had their butts kicked in the Halo lore. And it stuck out to me because of the image of a Spartan on their back. And I know what the scene is from. And with the music I was listening to, which was freestyle music, it must have been the beats, but it just really made me think about how we view our heroes. Because in the Halo lore, Spartans never die. That's just like propaganda. And it made me think of our D&D campaign where, you know, the character, the heroes at the end of the story will be remembered for all their great achievements, but we won't see them in their points of, you know, in their lowest moments. That's just going to be shared between them and their group. And so that really resonated with me in whatever story, you know, even thinking about, you know, statues or monuments to heroes past. You only see or only hear about the stories of triumph or the challenges that they ended up, you know, overcoming. But what about the challenges they didn't overcome? What were their downfalls? So that was something that just, my mind just was starting racing just from seeing a clip, a thumbnail that I didn't watch.
You didn't even watch it? You're just like inspired by the title and the idea that came from it. I love that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. That's dope.
So
it can come from anywhere, right?
Sure
That's
can.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You didn't even have to click for that inspiration. I'm
did not.
sorry to that video, but you did not get that ad revenue.
I will eventually go back and watch it, but that was not the mood I was in. That was not the zone I was in.
Yeah, no, that's dope. That's way better than what I'm about to share. So let's. I've been on this like weird movies and TV shows kick, and there's this show. It's since been canceled. There's 2 seasons, and it's called Happy with an exclamation point. That's the title, and it's about this like. I don't even remember, honestly. Is it a detective? I don't even remember what the main character does. It's kind of like a detective story, though. And he has this, like, tiny unicorn that's super profane and, like, says all this terrible shit. And it's, like, his inner monologue, and it's almost like his conscience, too. But it follows him around, and he doesn't listen to it at all. And it's, like... It's one of the weirdest, hands down, weirdest shows I've ever seen in my life. But in this vehicle, there's like all these super dark and horrible things that are sort of packaged in it. And it's so weird and uncomfortable on its face that it's sort of like you unknowingly experience this incredibly triumphant story, which is, I mean, just really beautifully told. It's like you sort of get... sideswiped into something really real and deep and emotional, and yeah, it just blew me away. I couldn't believe. I mean, I just watched it because I thought it'd be funny. Like, oh, this is weird, click, because I do things like that. But yeah, it actually just blew me away. I was really shout out to whoever made that. That was a beautifully made TV show. I wish they would have done a couple more seasons. I really enjoyed it. So Happy! Exclamation point. If you find out what his profession was in this show, let me know, because apparently watching 2 seasons is not enough to learn anything about the show.
What streaming service did you watch it on to help anybody get a better idea?
It was on Netflix.
Okay.
I don't know if it's still on Netflix.
Oh, copy that.
It was in the recesses of the internet that I can't endorse anyone else finding that way.
Well,
so you didn't click, and you can't find the one I'm mentioning. So no, it just teaches you that you can package a story in anything, and you can tell something that's really real and impacts people. And I think that's so neat. I always, I mean, from the D&D campaigns I've run, I always try to almost maybe not juxtaposition, but to subvert normal tropes. Mm-hmm. To try to make some surprising stories. But yeah, man, thanks for the inspiration. Quick housekeeping thing before we dive into the topic of I don't have time and other lies we tell ourselves is that if you like the podcast, and I know there is a lot of you who do, I know it because I can see our analytics. I know there's a lot of people out there and a lot of people around the globe who really like this podcast. And we're trying to grow. We're trying to make this into the biggest thing, the most positive thing that we can. And we can only do that with your help. So share the old cliche, like, subscribe, and follow. Yep. All those things. Leave us ratings or support us through anchor.fm/CRTVTHNKR. There's a support button that's also in the description of all of our podcasts. So wherever you're looking at it, there'll be a button that says support here for less than a cup of coffee. I mean, you can't get a better deal than that. So if you like what we do here, we're trying to do more of it and quit those pesky day jobs. Aren't they gross?
Isn't that the dream?
So if you can see it in your heart, see it in your pocket, then maybe see your way to putting it in our pocket. How about that? Hey. So thank you guys for listening. Really appreciate it. So, Michael.
Yes.
Do you have time, and what other lies do you tell yourself?
Well, I really like this topic. This is going to be an interesting discussion, and I think at the basis of this, or at the foundation of this issue, is how much we lie to ourselves about the time that we have. Because there are a lot of things that we say, and a lot of excuses that we'll make so that we don't hit our creative project that we're trying to hit or create. So not having time is a big lie that we tell ourselves. Obviously, we've said it a handful of times, but what does that mean, and how are there steps to correct that time? So you want to add anything to that?
I think the most unbelievable thing that I learned when I made a schedule for myself the first time was that even if I take breaks during the day, even if I play video games during the day, I can accomplish just about anything I can think of. And this is, of course, when I had my own photography company. So I would say my work days on photography weren't as rigorous as a 9 to 5, but still, if you schedule out, and the more intense you schedule out, obviously there's a point of no return, or like lessening returns, but if you schedule out every 20 minutes of your day, like I'm going to accomplish 20 minutes of this task, even if you have a crazy life, crazy family, all these things to do, if you schedule out 20 minutes, I don't know anybody whose life is too busy to schedule out 20 minutes. You're going to have time for so many more things than you ever thought were possible. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've been struck with every time I've set a schedule. And on top of that, I have been even more productive than I expected, but I've also been able to research and grow the things that I'm doing. So it's like I have time within that 20 minutes to not only complete the task, or at least the part of the task that I had scheduled, but I'm also able to then learn something new, or find the information I need for the next step of the task. So it's like, even if I've divided it out to some infinitesimal level, I can then, I don't know, grow. I can grow. I can learn.
Yeah.
So push myself.
So, as we're talking about this, what has been an issue, or when have you found yourself struggling for time? Because it's really easy to say, you have the time, just make the time. You have 20 minutes, you have 10 minutes, you have, whatever amount of time, you have an hour out of your day.
Just do it.
Right. It's really easy to say, just do it, just get it done. But when have you been in that time where you felt like you didn't have enough time, and how were you able to overcome that?
So I'm in a perpetual state of giving myself too many things to do. Mm-hmm. So if I don't have any projects, I'll create one and I'll do it. Mm-hmm. So even if I have nothing to do, I just moved back from Alaska. I had about 4 months where I was unemployed, so I had nothing to do. I've filled out my entire day of creative tasks, of setting things up with the podcast, posting on YouTube, doing all the things that you have to do to promote something like this. I have tasks galore that I've created, and I very quickly, because of that, it's easier for me to generate ideas, like I'm sure a lot of people, it's easier for me to generate ideas than it is to complete them. So I'll have this laundry list of stuff that I'm supposed to do now, quote unquote, because I've generated it, and it very quickly gets overwhelming, and then I can't do it. So I mean, just this week, I sat down last week. Anyway, I sat down. I made a schedule. I made a schedule of things my wife and I are going to do at the end of every day. So like Monday night is game night. Tuesday night is date night. Wednesday night, I can't remember, but on and on it goes. I've got a calendar. Never memorize anything that you can look up, to quote Albert Einstein. So it all comes down to there is a limiting that you do to yourself with a schedule. I say, okay, I was working on a drawing 2 weeks ago, and I limited myself to 1 hour that I'm going to sit down and do that. Okay. And so if I don't give myself a schedule, I'll give myself 30 minutes to go get my pens and go get the markers and set out the paper, get my coffee warm, and then I'll finally sit down, and then I'll decide if I want to draw for a little while. I'll talk myself into it, on and on, right? And if I just give myself an hour, I'm hustling. I'm like, I have more to do than I have time.
Yep.
I'm hustling. I'll sit down, everything. I'll get going. I was like, I don't have the time to really like piss and moan over this. So I'm just going to get going. And, and I finished the session I had in mind, in 45 minutes, and I had 15 minutes to then clean up and start on my next task. I did some extra laundry, folded some clothes, and then moved on to my next task.
Gotcha.
So I mean, it's literally any time that you have control over your schedule, and I'd say even at work, if you scheduled out your time in a 9 to 5, like I'm picturing office job. I don't really know how other jobs works super much, but I know when I worked at a deli, what I would do when we had slow times, I would clean the machines. And you're supposed to do it every hour, and there was like 6 of them. And there was only 2 people who could clean them, and I was one of them. So every time there was a free moment, I knew in my head, I created the schedule. I'm going to clean machine 1. I'm going to clean machine 2, you know? So it's just about populating the time you have control over, and having that ready to go ahead of time so that you aren't surprised by free time and you can just dive in and get going. It's more of a productivity exercise. But yeah, I think I've heard a lot of people say, like, I don't have time to do this. I never had time to get around to that. And it's like, well, I think you did, you know? Yeah. Like people, the notable exception to me is like people with a lot of kids that are like in sports. Then it's like, okay, yeah, you got to find time for your partner, and you can't even do that. So, and that's something you want to do. So, in theory, you should want to do. So, anyway, it's like, I feel like that's an exception, but even those people, I'll find, I'm in conversations with people who are saying that they either get up at 6 a.m. I met this guy who did, he trained ultra marathons, and he would get up at 4 in the morning, and he would be running, cycling, swimming until I think it was 7:30, and that's when the kids woke up. So that's when he'd get back to the house, and he would do the full day everybody else did, and he'd just go to bed an hour early. And I was like, I mean, you're losing a lot of sleep, but the dude was committed. Yeah. And that was the life he wanted to have. And so he did it. He made it happen. I think we make so many excuses for ourselves that we don't leave room for our creativity. We don't leave room for our honest self. And that's it.
There we go.
I arrived at the end.
Yeah. So, you know, time's a big kind of limited resource, you know, as we're talking about that. What are some of the other lies that we tell ourselves?
Well, before we move on, I want to hear your perspective. You have a much tighter schedule than I do, and a much more erratic schedule.
Yeah.
So, and I know for a fact that you are very specific about how you spend your time.
Yes.
So what do you do? What's your answer to this question?
To the question of I don't have time is kind of at the beginning of the week, I'll try and figure out what are the things that I need to do. So on weeks that we have D&D, I obviously need to prioritize prepping to get ready to DM and figure out what you guys are going to do during the session. So at some point when I get off of work, I have to tell my wife, hey, I need to spend some time doing this so that when it comes to the day that we can play, it's actually fun, special, memorable. And so that's one thing, like D&D. Then there's, you know, my chores that I need to do. There's walking the dogs and getting my own physical exercise in. So what I've done recently, since my wife and I had a talk about responsibilities at the beginning of the year on
oh snap.
it was a good talk. It was a good talk.
Good.
But really like breaking it up and seeing like, okay, this is what we're in charge of. This is what she's in charge of. So what I did is I created a list, and this is just how my brain works. My brain works on lists. So I made a list and I wrote down all the things that I need to be doing every week. And all I needed to do was write a check mark that I did it that week. And if I didn't do it that week, I would hit it the next week. But at a minimum, some things needed to be done bi-weekly, some things needed to be done weekly. And that includes D&D prepping. That includes just writing on my own, because I also am trying to create like different campaign settings for other groups. So there's like specifically, hey, Fine Stars Finest, wearing the shirt.
Hey, look at that shirt.
Can't really see it too well, but we have a D&D shirt for our home game.
Hey,
so I create these lists. So then when I get home, I can take a look at it and I can try and just check off one thing right after work. And like you said, my work schedule is crazy. I just got off a 13-day stretch all in a row. This last week, I ended up getting close to 55, 60 hours during the work week. Just because of some emergency circumstances that happened. But if you look at like that 13-day stretch, I also DM'd one of those days for you guys. So
heck yeah.
I still got off of like an 8-10 hour shift, came home, took a little power nap, and then we, played D&D for 5-6 hours.
I think you're hitting on another way to schedule too, which is like if you have a hierarchy or at least a list, a written something that you don't have to recall reflexively whenever you have time. It's like your schedule's a little more chaotic, so you have a list, and then you look at, okay, ahead of me I have an hour and 15 minutes. Which one of these can I either move the goalpost on or complete in an hour and 15?
Yep,
and if it's multiple, great. And if it's, just a little bit of one, that's okay too. And so I think that brings up another point, which is like being patient with yourself in this process. Every time I have tried to go to scheduling my life from not, it's like the first 6 days are insane. And suddenly I'm busier than I've ever been in my life. And I'm like, I just don't have time. And because I've done this so many times where I just fall off the wagon and then I get back on, where I just sort of, okay, this is that part of the process. I just be forgiving to myself and say, like, in a week, all this is going to be done, and I'm going to be ready to ease into the life I want. And so, I'm going to keep the schedule on the calendar, and I'm going to move ahead as though I'm accomplishing tasks. And then when I get there, I'm just going to drop in. And we're going to, act like it's fake it till you make it a little bit.
Yeah, of course. And I think, you're kind of hitting on a big part too, as far as, mental health is, allowing yourself to fail doesn't mean you failed at that objective, right? So in, say doing laundry for the week, because I didn't do it doesn't mean I failed at laundry and I failed at this new schedule and I failed my list for the week. It just means, okay, you didn't do it, but do it next week.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've caught myself into is like, oh, well, I didn't do it, so I guess I'm not going to do it.
Ooh, yeah. Accepting responsibility is like 90% of scheduling stuff. This is taking control of your life and taking control of what you accomplish in it. And scheduling is like the adult thing to do. And I feel like with art, and maybe it's just young artists, maybe it's just this generation, because that's the one I'm pulling from, but it's also like there's just this huge anti whatever people have done. Maybe that's all younger people, but it's like when you introduce the idea of like, yeah, if you want to be a mature adult that is able to face head on all their responsibilities, you're going to be scheduling. You have to schedule, especially if you're self-employed. It's like there's no way around it. There's no way around it.
And I think that's what we even talked about. The podcast was, we needed to have structure here. Because if we have structure, and in a lot of our organizations, our faction episodes, our world building episodes, we talked about having structure, and through that structure, creativity will thrive. And through being structured as an adult, you're going to be able to thrive, whatever your goal is. If it's creativity, if it's work, if it's choring, if you have some type of structure, and you can stick to it, you're going to be thriving. It's, I mean, that's just my experience. You know, I won't say that that's for everybody, but from what I see, having some structure, having a little bit of forgiveness with yourself, that's going to help you really thrive. And cutting out time that's important for you and making it known that's important. Like even before we started recording today, I was like, hey, I need to get these things done today, and then I'll head over and we can record. And for me, that was just prioritizing, one, my mental health, two, slowly taking baby steps because we're not going to play D&D for a couple weeks, and then three, just getting some stuff done at the house because, like I said, I've been working for 13 days. My wife is out of town, so I needed to take care of some stuff. But prioritizing that and not feeling like I needed to get everything done today and I needed to have, notes for everything. And I was able to allow myself some forgiveness because I didn't get all my chores done, but I'll get it done tomorrow.
Well, that's something that's really important too, is like if you're scheduling, that doesn't mean I'm going to add now 20 hours of grueling work. Mm-hmm. It means that you are leaving room for yourself to breathe and be human and to enjoy things, play video games, whatever. Mm-hmm. It just means that with the same benefits, you're going to, I'm going to play video games, and instead of playing for 60 hours straight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play for 60 minutes straight. Yep. I'm going to know that going in, and I'm going to enjoy the heck out of it. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of, it comes with a perspective shift towards enjoying it because you know it's only going to be for an hour. Yep. And I think that was a great thing that satellite TV, now that it's gone away to streaming services, mm-hmm. The great thing was you only had 60 minutes to watch the show. You had commercials to get up and use the bathroom and do whatever you needed to do. Yeah. And then it was done for the week, and you could go back to your life. It was, it was great. Binging stuff is rough. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to go back to something else you said, which was that if you are within a system that is well-defined, your creativity explodes and your time explodes and your ability to, it's the freest you can be. It's super counterintuitive, and anytime I've tried to talk to people about that, I haven't quite found the right way. So maybe you can help me as a listener. But when you have a defined space, there was this an AI that they made trying to make a moving robot that mimicked human movement. Mm-hmm. And they realized in these decades of trial and error trying to make these robots do what people can do, they realized that they didn't program in the one thing that it really needed to experience life around it or to act within the space around it, and that was to define the exact space that it occupies. And so they gave the robot the parameters of its own person, and basically it can't act outside of that. And so it needed a physical, digital form. It needed an understanding of its physical being in order to exist in space outside of that, which is a little bit abstract. But it's the same thing with us, is if we have this structure in our lives, suddenly we know exactly the parameters of part of our life, and then we can just get wildly creative, knowing, okay, I have an hour to do this. If I get it done before then, I can do anything I want. I can move tasks around. I can just sit down and enjoy the day. I can have tea, whatever. But it's like once you give your mind, here's another example. I'm jumping around. I'm sorry, but
you're good.
Another example is when I was running that pirate campaign, I had a playlist that, and it always had the same first song. And so I would go for walks at the end of the day when I needed to prep. I would just turn on the playlist. As soon as I heard that first song, that's another structure thing. It cued off my brain, and it was like immediately, after about 3 or 4 weeks of doing that, immediately I would just drop in to that campaign and those ideas. I didn't have to wait for my brain to get there. It was like, oh, I'm within this chunk of my day. Here's all the ideas I've been working on. Your subconscious just serves up all this stuff. It just loves feeding you crap. And so yeah, that's just the more structure you can have, the more explosive, I should say, you can create. The more explosively you can live your life how you want to live it, and that's a freedom that not a lot of people in the world have, honestly. But it's a privilege.
It is, and I believe that that's also a maturity thing, right? So when you're younger, you typically have a lot more options to go. I mean, thinking like you have a lot less responsibilities for the most part, and I'm generalizing. High school, college age, you have a lot less responsibilities. You don't have a mortgage, you don't have certain bills that you have to pay. Typically, you may be living with either a group of people or your parents. And so there's not really that need to have that structure, because you can, kind of go by the seat of your pants and do whatever. I know when I was in college, like the only structure I had was my classes. And so I would go to class maybe. But the classes I wouldn't miss was my kickboxing class and my jiu-jitsu class. So I would make sure, those were a priority. Hanging out with friends was a priority. But that was those, talking about the list, I didn't have a big list. I only had 3 things to do. My wife, now girlfriend at the time, I mean, she was in another college out of state. So it was just hang out with friends, go to class, and work out. Those were the only 3 goals. So now, as I get outside of being an adult, going outside of college and start becoming an adult, I realize I don't just have all this free time. Now that I have more responsibilities as far as work, and work gives me insurance coverage, and so there are a lot of things now that I can't afford to lose. That also puts a little bit of added pressure to like make your time worth it. And at a certain point, you realize how much your time is worth. And through my experience from work, I know how much I get paid at work. And not that it's my value as a person, but that's how I've started thinking about my time, is if I'm going to spend, an hour, 2 or 3 out, not really doing anything and just kind of BSing around, that's, a certain amount of money that I'm
Close
not
one.
making. Yeah. I did the math up here.
Yeah.
So that's
But
like a certain
right.
amount of money that I'm losing, right? But I'm trying to put some type of value on my time, because at the end of the day, our time is the most valuable. When wherever I spend it is extremely valuable, because I will never get that back. And so if I spend it going out here and BSing when I really want to do X, Y, and Z, I need to spend some time doing X, Y, or Z. And I think as we get older, we understand that time is a lot more valuable. So I should really respect how much time I'm putting into my creative endeavors.
Well, I think that brings us nicely to another lie, which is that one of the ones that I've just started telling myself, and I've heard this is probably too early for this one. You're going to laugh when you hear it, but it's that I'm too old to start something new.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I mean, like, I'm not that old, but I'm not that young either, right? I'm in the almost middle-aged. And anyway, so when I started wood burning, this was 6 years ago now, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that. My thought process would be the same as if I started something today. It's like, I'm not very good at it. Is this really worth my afternoon? Is this really worth putting in all this effort? And you just don't see the road ahead. You don't see the possible mastery. And I think, we were talking about things I've done in my life earlier today. And one of those things, or one of those through lines, is that I do a good job, I think, of seeing the end goal or the end possibility. So, like, I'm in a band with your wife, Molly, the Molly Moon Band, and it's easy for me to pour time and effort into that because I can see what the potential of the finish line is. Like, we could potentially, if the music gets good enough and we get people to catch on, we could be touring. We could go around the U.S. We could be a band. We could be up on stage in front of, several thousand people. I'm not saying we're going to be the Rolling Stones, but you can get a good crowd even if you're not that big of a band. And I can see that, and I can see why that would be worth the work, and that keeps me invested. That keeps me trying. And if we didn't start 2.5 years ago, and we didn't, go in on a wing and a prayer, I wouldn't be where I am right now with it. So anyway, it's seeing the finish line and understanding that, no matter how old you are, even if you're looking at it like, well, I may only have tomorrow or next week, if this is something you want to do, you matter enough to pursue that. You matter enough to pursue it. And no matter if you're 9 or 90, now is the time. If you have the time and the want, do it.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to even what I was saying earlier about failure and understanding that if you're trying something new, it doesn't have to look like a masterpiece. It can just be something that you're trying, and then through failure you learn. And there's nothing wrong with failure. Our society has, brought such a harsh emotion to failure, but that's part of growing. You don't learn until you make mistakes, and then either what to do or what not to do, but in some way you learn. And that's, like you said, you're not ever too old to start something new. So yeah, that is a big lie that you're told, that you need to have your life figured out, when you're 18 to 22, which, anyone who's 30 older, they know they didn't have their stuff figured out 18 to 22, that was just a struggle too. As a 20-year-old is like, I don't have my life figured out, or I guess I'm going to be at this dead end job for 40 years like my manager is, or whatever, so.
Amen.
That's where it's like you can do a lot, and you can switch careers. And I always encourage people at my job, it's like, if you don't like what you're doing, leave. Do something, find something you want to do. And this is something my brother used to do all the time. when we worked at FedEx together, he would go to people and he would just talk and be like, hey, so like, how are you doing? What's going on? How's your life? Especially because he was seasonal, so he would come in every summer. And he was like, so why are you doing this? Why are you delivering packages with FedEx? And it's like, well, this isn't what I want to do. This is what I actually want to do. And he's like, well, then go and do it. And man,
he's like the Grim Reaper for FedEx.
Dude, I would get so mad at him because like I started moving up in FedEx, and he would, like I said, was seasonal, and he would come in and get these drivers to quit and start pursuing their dream. And I was like, that's great for them, but man, you're kind of hurting me now. Now I got to deal with this fallout.
Like a wonderful person, but bad for business.
yeah. But it was awesome to see, hindsight. Like, these guys took my brother's words to heart and just took off and, started living their life and doing something that they wanted to do. And they weren't young, they were like 30s, 40s, and just were like, you know what? I don't need this.
I had, my old boss hated this. I made a cup for myself when I opened my business full time, Viral Photography.
Yeah.
Back then, I made myself a coffee cup that said, failure is the only road to success. And my old boss viewed himself as perfect. So it was like just the existence of failure was enough to offend him. So I always took that cup into work. So I can't imagine why that didn't work out. Anyway, so failure is the only road to success. Anybody who says that they never failed and they got where they're at is lying to you. Failure is the only way. It's the only way. Repetition.
For sure. So one of the other topics I wanted to bring up as far as our limited resource, I was just trying to move on. Was and I wanted to get your thought on this, was feeling too comfortable in your art style and kind of relaxing and losing focus.
Dude, I'm there right now. Photography. I took pictures with somebody the other day, and in case they're listening, the pictures still came out good. I'm not saying they didn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I took some pictures the other day, and it was like, these are the same pictures that I have took for the last 2 or 3 years I was doing photography.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I was hustling with the business. I was trying to get all that worked out. It's like I didn't make any progress. I am so tired to death of those pictures and that style of photo. It's like I'm ready for that to not be the thing anymore. And so I'm right in the middle of that complacency coming back to bite you. It's like I did not schedule time to research. I didn't find time to learn. My buddy, I always talk about Brandon Gorey. It's like he is relentless in, you could say self-deprecating, but I mean, he's relentless in saying, this is good, but I can do better. He always pushes himself. And it's like, I don't know, it's amazing to see how far he's come doing that.
Yeah.
And I did not do that because he didn't go into full-time business doing that. It still remained a side hustle as he's been learning, and he's been growing that, and he's been growing his skills, which has been really cool to watch, but he's been sort of lessening his exposure, I guess. He's lessening his ability to crash and burn or not be able to make his bills while he's still learning. So anyway, he's really great at pushing himself, and you can see his work compared to mine. It's like I started sooner, and then I made the business, and it sort of was like a pause button. So anyway, I got super complacent, and it's so frustrating when you get there and you realize it's like, oh man, I've been sitting still. And I'm ready, man. I'm ready to start doing my research. I've been like looking up all kinds of photos, like where are we at artistically now? There's like all kinds of new photographers that they're hyping in magazines now, and it's like these are new styles. These are things that I never would have thought of, and it's good. It's good. It's humbling, and I had to like sit there and look at it and say, is this, the older I get, the more willing I am to ask this question, is this good enough? Is this enough for me? You know, like they're good photos. Like I could go toe to toe with 90% of people that run photography businesses. I feel comfortable saying that in the area and say that my work is going to be better. No offense to anyone. You can just assume you're in that top 10% and let it be. But I think I could. And is that enough for me? Ultimately, the answer is no. I'm always afraid that the answer is going to be yes. I feel like I'm going to reach a point in my life where it's like, yeah, it's good enough. And I'm just going to go out to pasture and eat grass for the rest of my life. But I think it's important to ask that so you give yourself the opportunity to intentionally answer the question so that tomorrow, when I'm knee deep in all these pictures and I'm like starting to doubt myself and say, maybe I couldn't make it there, I can remind myself that I chose to pursue this road because I know that by the end of it, I will be better than where I started. That doesn't mean I'm going to be as good as the people in the photos. It doesn't mean I'm going to be the greatest who ever lived. It just means that I know at the end of this road, I will be better for it. And that's a good enough reason to continue.
That's good. I don't really have...
Leaving you hanging.
Yeah, no.
In
that was...
what, Michael? In what?
No, I was going to ask, how do you try and get yourself out of that? But, you kind of already answered that by saying you're going to do your research and you're already looking up different photographers and different kind of art styles that are coming up. So that was good.
Well, there's some more components to it. That I'll offer as a bit of a kindness to the perfectionists and the self-critics out there, which is that a lot of stuff that I do, I practice in the sort of faux fashion, like Instagram model area. Is like that's a good place to sort of like just practice your craft because a lot of people are just collaborating and doing things for free because it helps them make content and it helps you practice, right? So it's like it's a win-win, even though people have very little skin in the game, so to speak. So I find people that are A, motivated to try something new, and B, are like just nice people, because then I know they're going to be forgiving if I fuck it up.
Yep.
and chances are, because I'm trying something new, I'm going to. It's like I'll still. It's sort of like when comedians are trying out new material, right? They phase in the new stuff, and they keep the good jokes so that they know that they can make the room laugh, and everybody will feel like they got their money's worth. But they also got to try out the new stuff and see how it worked out. So it's a lot like that. I try to give myself room to fail a little bit so that I can feel safe and so that I can try it to the best of my ability, instead of like I'm a big fan of anarchy and flying by the seat of my pants, and just like seeing how it goes. But I also have to have that amount of safety to feel safe enough to then get flung off into the universe. So, does that answer the question fully? I hope so.
Yeah, I think so. So we kind of talked about not having time, feeling a little bit too comfortable, and like you said, flying by the seat of our pants. What are some of the other lies that you feel like we tell ourselves as artists or creatives that get us stuck from creating?
Oh, I think there's two that sort of rounds out this idea to me, and they're both halves of the same coin, and it's like both are equally as damaging. And one, and there's a running joke in any group of artists that have been doing it for a while, and there's the people who monetize too soon, and their art is not ready for prime time. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's the one side of the coin that's like, I'm amazing at this, and I'm God's gift to whatever, oil paints, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side of the coin that it's like, I'm never going to make any money at this, or I'm never going to be good enough to monetize. And that one, people in artist groups are more scared of, because a lot of artists don't know how they made their fan base. So they're afraid anytime someone new comes around that they're gonna lose their base. They're gonna lose their people.
Interesting.
And they're both equally damaging, because and it's a little bit about gambling. It's a little bit about knowing, intuition, knowing when to dive in, when the water's good, right? Like when to throw in your net, when to fish, and then when to go to the dock for the day. Yeah. It's a little bit about intuition, but we lie to ourselves saying like that we're not. Either it's like maybe it's hero worship, or like people saying like, well, I'll never be The Rock. Well, yeah, you probably won't, but there's a hell of a lot of gray area in there. Like there's this kid I used to go to Tennis Academy.
Let that one slide.
Yeah. I used to go to a tennis academy with, and he's been going to auditions. He's been trying to act for years, but he's also been doing his rapping career, and he's actually like landed his first big role, and his first starring role. I mean, like where he's in a cast of 10 or less. And it's the new Osaka show.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Imanis Fandi is his name. And I went to Tennis Academy with him. It was like the summer camps. But anyway, so like I won't say like we're friends or like we're close or something, but it's like I know him. I could probably shoot him a message, and up until now he would respond. I don't know if he would now. He's pretty fucking big time. But anyway, it's like we tell ourselves that we're not the people we see on the silver screen. We're not the people we see on stage. But that's over and over demonstrably false. Like this kid that I knew since we were both knuckleheads, right? Like he is going to be on one of the biggest shows in maybe the world. After years of trying. He's the guy. This is his moment, and what he does with the the attention he receives from this is what will decide his greatness ultimately. But he's given that opportunity. Like I said earlier, me and your wife Molly are in a band. Mm-hmm. We're in a band with people who've been on a stage in front of 10,000 people at festivals, that are like international festivals that are well known with huge name bands. And it's like they were, up on stage in front of this huge group of people. Mm-hmm. They are the people. They are the ones that you're aiming for. And we know them. They walk among us. They are us. It's all attainable.
Yeah.
So don't lie to yourself and say that that's not a possibility. Mm-hmm. But also, try to know when you're ready. If you can't be an honest critique of your artwork, find somebody who can be. And be ready for a beat down, because that is a rough first couple go-rounds if you haven't done it before. But yeah, make sure you find somebody who has your best interest in mind, who is going to tell you honestly what they think of your work, and then work on it. Do the hard stuff. But don't lie to yourself and say, I've never been tested in front of people. I've never sold anything, but I'm ready to go full time. You got to do the groundwork. Yeah. And starting, if you want to be up on stage, you can start today. I don't care if you're 60. You can start today.
Heck yeah.
A lot of my dad's friends are still in bands, and they're awesome to go watch and listen to. So it's never too late to pursue your dream, and it's never too late to enjoy the ever living shit out of life. I think you should.
Absolutely. And I think one of, kind of the last lie that I feel like, I want to touch on right now is something that I struggle with was like, if I'm going to create something, I'm going to get judged so hard for it. But I was listening to, I think I was watching my Instagram reels, to be honest. And it was just like a little clip of George St. Pierre talking about what he would do to calm his nerves. And if you don't know who George St. Pierre is, he is one of the greatest welterweight MMA fighters, period. Arguably the GOAT of his time. One of the best MMA fighters. Super, super, good dude. Never interacted with him or anything like that. But he was interviewed by Joe Rogan, and he was like, this is what I did to calm my nerves, was I would go out and just look at the people, and go to somewhere that's like not around the stadium, that's not around any of the people who praise him to be the greatest, or anybody who's in that combat sports world. And he was like, they don't care, and that brought him like a calm and anxiety, and reduced his anxiety. And like you said, peace. He was like, that grandma that's grabbing her groceries and going home, it's not going to impact her whether I win or lose, and that's how I felt. It was like, oh man, as I create in my art, as I lie to myself and say, I don't have enough time, I don't have this, people aren't going to like it. Some people aren't going to care. Most of the people in the world aren't going to care. There's, 7 billion people on the planet. They're not all going to care. I understand you feel the judgment from that small group of people. But more than likely, those people want to succeed, want to see you succeed. So, as a calmness or as something to reduce your anxiety, they're not going to care. that brings me, a little bit of peace.
Well, like everybody compares themselves to people like the Beatles, or like the outliers, the people that it's impossible to compare yourself to.
Right.
And it's like, the people like the Beatles never looked at it, at least to my knowledge and anything I've ever read about them, they never looked at it as, we're going to be this huge impact. It's like, we're having a hell of a fun time making music, until they weren't, right?
Yeah.
But we're having a fun time, and we're going to keep doing it until we stop having a fun time. And it's like, the gigantic groups of people who know who the Beatles are and appreciate their music, those people decide what the meaning is. It's not you. It's not if I spend an extra hour on this, or if I come about it just right, then suddenly it's going to mean all these things to everybody. It's like if you enjoy the hell out of it, you've got a shot at meaning something to somebody.
Yeah.
And that's great. If you get one person that it means something to, other than they're just kind of bobbing their head and enjoying it,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, that's huge.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, don't compare yourself to the all-time greats,
Yeah.
because that's disappointing for 7,999,000,000.
Yeah. And I've
people in
also
the
heard
world.
like good quotes from people who are up like the goats of their field. They're like, don't compare yourself to me. Be your own. Learn from me, but also learn from the other guy, and learn from that guy, and learn from that group. Be like, they don't see themselves on the pedestal of knowing everything or that they are the best. So learn from everybody you can, because everyone else also feels anxious about, their art.
Amen to that. And that's one thing I wanted to wrap us out on, if you'll allow me. Limited resource mindset. All the things we're talking about are encapsulated in this idea that there's not enough to go around. There's not enough that you can stake your place out in the world. There's so many people. How could you possibly? Well, maybe numbers wise, it doesn't make sense. But people have been doing it all throughout time. You exist, you matter, and that's your place in the world. It's not predicated or based on your ability to make art. However, you definitely can stake out a place for yourself in the world. There are not limited resources. I mean, in some regards, there are the amount of crop harvest, the amount of whatever, but when it comes to your ability to make art and the ability for you to interface with the things that you like in the world, outside of maybe death, there is no limit to what you're allowed to create. So don't concern yourself with it. Just dive in. There's enough for you. There's enough of a place for you. There's enough of a way that you can create. I was at a open mic night the other night.
More improv?
More improv? No. No, I want to do that again. I really do. I'm getting the itch again. But it was an open mic night for just people with a guitar. And I was feeling nervous about, me and Molly been talking about playing out places and doing our music for a live crowd. And I was getting nervous about it because it's been a while. And I was at this open mic night, and it's just like, it's a bunch of older people who are like 60 and above, people with guitars, and the whole room, it's like they've all been friends since they started, and they're just playing music for each other. And
awesome.
It was like, this is the greatest thing ever. Because they found their niche, and they fell in love with it, and they've made a life out of it. And it's like, this is a fun night. Like everybody's dressed up, and and they're dudded up in their boots and their hat, all this stuff. And it was like, dude, that's what I want out of life, and it's just never too late. As long as you're still alive and kicking, it's never too late to dive into that art. And yeah, man, I hope you do, because that's a beautiful thing.
100%.
Well, thank you, creative thinkers all around the globe, for joining us in the lives we tell ourselves. Try to be honest with yourself from here on out, and just keep reminding yourself to be patient and to be honest with yourself. And give yourself a shot, because when you get out there in the world, they sure will. To everybody around the globe, thank you so much for joining us. Follow, subscribe, help us out. Anchor.fm/CRTVTHNKR. Less than a cup of coffee a month. Not a day, a month. That'll help us out so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Everybody, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.